Welcome to the Illinois State House News podcast of the Rod Blagojevich corruption trial. For Illinois State House News in Chicago, I'm Kevin Lee. The date is Monday, July 26th, 2010. A day that might have marked the possible end of testimony in the trial, but instead we saw fireworks without the finale. Defense attorney Sam Adams Jr. was supposed to give his closing argument at the end of the day on Monday. Now, last week, the Blagojevich defense team criticized federal prosecutors for not calling up what they perceive as key witnesses, such as convicted influence peddler Tony Rezko. The defense team was making the case before the media that the prosecutor's case was incomplete without calling these witnesses, and Adam wanted to make that case before jurors during his closing argument. But federal judge James B. Zagel would have none of it. Zagel told Adam to keep his closing argument on witnesses who actually took the stand. Zagel also said that he would hold Adam with contempt in court if he did not stick to the witnesses who took the stand, and told Adam that he could throw Adam in jail if he did not comply. Now, Adam said he'd be willing to do whatever it takes to help his client outside the courtroom on Monday.
Best client I've ever had, and it's an innocent man. I just want to do the best I can for him.
Does the judge's ruling gut your closing arguments?
I'm not going to comment on the judge's ruling.
Is there a possibility that anybody else could do the closing other than you? You've been preparing for this the entire case.
We're going to sit down and figure out what's best, and we'll go with that.
How does it affect if you can't give that instruction, the missing witness instruction?
Well, I don't know. Everybody seems to know. Well, I'm not going to comment on it at this time. Let me figure this thing out. I've been working nonstop all weekend, and I'm tired.
You're really prepared to go to jail?
Definitely.
Why?
Definitely. Because my job as a lawyer to do everything I can for my client. That's what it takes. If it's necessary to do it in a heartbeat. My dad did it for 10 days for a client, and I have no qualms about going to prison if that's what's best.
Do you think it'll come to that?
I'm not going to comment on that now.
Now, perhaps as a sign of family unity, Patty and Rod Blagojevich were joined in the courtroom by their two daughters, as well as Patty's sister, State Representative Deborah Mell. It'll be interesting to see if both their daughters and Miss Mell continue to join Patty and Rod in the courtroom as the week continues. Monday's proceedings began with federal prosecutor Christopher Niewohner beginning his closing argument. Now, federal prosecutors came prepared for their closing argument. They had a PowerPoint presentation that included easy-to-follow outlines, charts, graphs, and headshots of the witnesses so jurors could recall who gave testimony and at what time on what subject. Prosecutors, of course, focused on allegations that Blagojevich conspired to trade state action for personal gain. The most ostensible example, of course, was the conspiracy to trade the U.S. Senate seat for campaign contributions, for a possible cabinet position in the federal government, for even his own foundation in which he could possibly have poured millions into. Now, federal prosecutors were also very savvy. They outlined each charge leveled against both Rod Blagojevich and older brother Robert Blagojevich, and they tried to demonstrate that in each count, whether it be bribery or extortion or wire fraud, in each count, the federal prosecutors tried to show that they had met their burden of proof. They were very organized, but at the same time, they went over their allotted time by a considerable margin. And yet, Judge Zagel didn't give them any warning whatsoever. Prosecutors went well into the morning and even into the afternoon, to the point where when Michael Ettinger, defense attorney for Robert Blagojevich, began his closing argument, it was after lunch, and you could tell some of the jurors were starting to wander off. Some were dozing a little bit, and it didn't help that Ettinger had notes that were displayed all across his table. Federal prosecutors had an organized PowerPoint presentation, but Ettinger was going based on the sound of his voice. He didn't really have any documents, any visuals to keep jurors occupied. Ettinger began his closing argument by providing a character defense for Robert Blagojevich. Ettinger focused on Robert Blagojevich's time in the military, that he was an upstanding citizen, that he volunteered for the YMCA and the Red Cross. That basically Robert had nothing to do with the supposed horse trading or any sort of the trading.